นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ So it's a very good thing to come together and do a bit of meditation. Many people say that when they practice together as a group and with a teacher, they get more energy. Perhaps they try harder. When we try harder, our mind settles down quicker. We can let go of some of the distractions. The reason we practice in this way is our aim is to see the truth, see the Dhamma in our own experience. Most of us have read or heard teachings before, so we have some background in what the Buddha taught. But now we have to put that into practice and actually see and know for ourselves through our own experience. That's what the Buddha encouraged us to do. He didn't encourage us just to believe what he said, even though it makes sense, sounds correct, sounds good. He encouraged us to put it into practice so we can know for ourselves, so that we can actually free our minds from suffering and the causes of suffering. Earlier today I was talking to someone who was saying, I like to meditate, I want to meditate, but I have to look after my parents, my family, particularly my elderly parents, which is a common experience because we've all got parents, and it's quite often that as they get older we have to help them, look after them in different ways. It's worth remembering what the Buddha said about the best way to repay the debt we have to our parents. We might have gratitude and awareness our parents have helped us in the past. And the Buddha said the best way to help them is establish them in faith, in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. Increase their faith and establish their faith. If they've had little faith, then establish their faith. If they already have faith, well, increase it, improve it, make it stronger. And then where they've not been practicing precepts, sila, morality, get them practicing that. Or if they're already practicing, well, make their practice firmer. Encourage them to undertake to keep maybe the 5 precepts or even the 8 precepts if they're able to. And to get them to practice chaka, is generosity, charity, practicing letting go of some of their wealth, however little or much they have. Practice generosity and know how to give away, to reduce some of their attachment. And the hardest of all, he said, get them to develop wisdom, understanding of the Four Noble Truths, and why we suffer, what suffering is, where it comes from, its cause, and how to practice to end suffering and experience the end of suffering for themselves. So then, if you practice meditation, you're doing that for yourself. You're learning how to end and understand your own suffering and end it. Then you're only going to learn what you need to help your parents or anyone else, your children, your friends, colleagues. The more we practice ourselves, the more we can encourage others to practice. Partly through example, partly through actually explaining to them what we do, we can encourage them to practice. So devoting some time regularly to meditate is not any different from helping those around you. It might actually help you to help them better, improve your understanding so you can help them more and more effectively. We have this problem as Buddhist practitioners. We're always kind of making choices and saying, well, I can't practice because I have to work, or I have to look after my family or my parents, or I have this obligation or that duty. But really you might say the breakthrough in your practice, one important breakthrough in practice, is getting to realize it's all part of the practice. If you are helping someone else, that's part of your practice. Work is part of the practice. Everything is part of the practice. And that includes meditation. Even meditation is not limited to what we've been doing just now, sitting quietly with our eyes closed. The very same qualities you cultivate when you're sitting quietly with your eyes closed, you're cultivating at all times in your life, if you're following the Buddhist path. When you're going to work, or if you are helping your parents in some way, when you're helping them, you're still also observing your own mind as you do that. You have feelings of tiredness, you have different thoughts, opinions and views coming up to do with yourself, to do with them, to do with your relationship, if that's what you're dealing with. And that becomes part of your meditation. If you're helping someone, you have to observe your state of mind and what's going on in your mind as you help them. If you're helping another person, you're literally physically caring for them, or at least assisting them in different ways, giving them information, talking to them, listening to them. Your own mind is going to be reacting all the time, isn't it? Some say if it's parents, often we disagree with our parents, what they say, or we've heard them say things so many times that we almost have a habitual reaction of irritation, aversion, disagreements. We've formed many opinions and views in our life, and especially to those people we've seen most often. So who have you seen most in your life is your parents, from day one till this day, if they're still alive. You've seen them and heard them probably more than anyone else. Maybe as you become older, maybe you have a partner, or a husband or a wife. Maybe later you have your own children. Well, they may also become very central. But your parents have been there from day one till this day, until the day they die. They're always your parents. So your own mind is going to be full of reactions as you engage with them. Even if it's only briefly, or if they're living with you and you're caring for them, it'll be more often. But you'll have thoughts, feelings, views, opinions constantly arising. And some will be wholesome and some will be unwholesome. And that's part of our practice. And the way you relate to the people around you, whether it's your children or your parents or whoever, you're cultivating exactly the same qualities as when you're sitting on your meditation cushion with your eyes closed. You're cultivating what we call right effort, in the effort to bring up skillful states of mind, such as mindfulness, kindness, compassion, wisdom and understanding, faith, energy, patience, and so on. And you're aiming to abandon unskillful states of mind that may come into your stream of consciousness as you're sitting there talking to your parent or helping them in some way, relating to them in some way. So your stream of consciousness may turn into some form of aversion, it's very common, or delusion. You may get stuck in wrong views, or some form of greed. You notice if you're helping someone else, you might feel tired or might be stressful. Your mind often craves distraction, and distraction tends to be coming from some form of greed, wanting some pleasurable experience to get away from the pain or the difficulty of the current thing you're engaged with. So if you're caring for someone, maybe you're giving a lot of your physical energy and your time doing things for that person, which is overall a good thing. But then from moment to moment as you're doing that job, there will be times when your mind craves something else. Your little pleasure, your little indulgences, the things that bring you happiness, you often crave them all the more when you're helping someone else, because you get tired and you're giving a lot to someone else, so then your mind rebels and says, I want this for me. So you start wishing for or imagining or seeking out your own pleasure. So just helping or being with someone else doesn't mean to say you're going to be immune from all the different mental defilements. They may even come up all the more stronger than before. We all know what it's like, caring for someone. You get aversion, annoyance, irritation. You can become fed up, partly because you're physically tired, partly because you're dealing with difficulties. It's challenging. And then your mind seeks to indulge. So often it can go in a spiral of mental defilement. So you go from aversion to greed, or maybe delusion. You become very tired, so then your mind just blanks out. Or you form misunderstandings, like when you're helping somebody, often you get caught into delusion. You think you know that person, or you know what they're doing or why, but you're just following your own opinion, and maybe that may be far from the truth. It's very easy to become deluded. You think you know them better than they know themselves, you know what's best, you know what is what, but whether those views and opinions are correct is a different matter. Maybe they're just being fed by your own sense of self in that situation. So greed, anger and delusion can rise up even when you're helping somebody else. You may delude yourself, you may say, oh, well, I'm helping them, I'm doing something good. But from moment to moment, that good intention of helping someone disappears, doesn't it? You can become angry as you help someone, or greedy or deluded as you help someone. It's not like a fixed thing that you can just sit back and say, oh, I'm doing this good deed here, this good action, helping this person, and I don't need to watch over my mind anymore because I'm doing this good thing. You still have to practice awareness and mindfulness of what's coming up in your mind as you're doing that activity. So meditation is like this. You do your formal meditation, but then in other parts of your life, exactly the same things are happening in your mind, and you need to cultivate this sense of taking care of your mind as you do these other activities. As you go to work, as you help your kids, as you help your parents, as you engage with your partner, as you do this, do that. Are you looking after your mind? My teacher Ajahn Kalyano used to say, whenever you give up that task of looking after your mind, which is quite understandable in the course of a busy day, there'll be times when you kind of neglect to observe yourself, you get lost in things. He said, whenever you give up that task of looking after your mind, it's like your mind becomes an orphan. It's like a child who the parents have gone away. Your mind, when you stop looking after it, it becomes an orphan. And what's it like being an orphan? Well, it's horrible because the parents have gone. Orphans feel lonely, neglected. Nobody's caring for them, so they're exposed to all kinds of risks and dangers, and it's not a good situation. And your mind is like that. When you're not looking after it, you're not cultivating mindfulness, right effort. You're not reflecting or observing yourself and understanding whether your mind is in a good state or a bad state. It becomes like an orphan. And what do orphans crave? They crave love and care and attention from a parent or guardian or somebody. They need that. And our mind is the same. If we neglect our mind, then it gets into trouble. It tends to dwell in more unskillful states. We start to feel stressed. That's why you say when you're caring for somebody, even though you may have a basic intention or wish to help or do something good, if you're not looking after your own mind at the same time, then it can actually turn into something that's just generating suffering for yourself, and maybe that comes out in the way you relate to the person you're trying to care for. You might say this is an example of how the challenge of practicing what we call the 4 Brahma-viharas in daily life. These 4 qualities the Buddha encouraged us to develop. Brahma means something that's superior. It's the word we use for a god, Brahma, God, but it really means superior states of mind that we aspire to cultivate, both in our meditation and in our relationships with other people. There's metta, Brahma-vihara, so the superior mental state of kindness, goodwill, you say loving kindness, friendliness. Karuna Brahma-vihara, compassion, so the superior state of compassion. Mudita Brahma-vihara, superior state of sympathetic joy, so sharing in the happiness, the success of others and oneself. And Upekkha Brahma-vihara, cultivating equanimity, the superior state of equanimity. These 4 qualities support each other, they grow out of each other, they're not separate from each other, they grow together in the one mind, this one mind we have, and they support each other. So say you are caring for somebody, your basic attitude is one of kindness and then a wish for that person to be free from suffering. But you'll notice if you're helping someone who is suffering, there's a danger that you become so involved in their suffering that you take some of it on. Through your empathy, you become caught up in their situation, you worry about them, you feel for them, you feel their pain, and so on. And so your mind can become easily caught into unwholesome, unskillful states as you're doing something good, but you're from moment to moment may be caught into stressful thinking, stressful feelings, stressful emotions. So we also need upekkha to back up our karuna, equanimity to back up the compassion. So that you're helping, but you're not helping to the point where you attach so much that you're suffering as you help. And this is a skill that comes through practicing, cultivating these qualities of meditation that we develop on the meditation cushion, but now in daily life, say caring for someone, working with people, helping others, dealing with others, how to deal with the world but not get so involved and so caught up that one suffers, gets caught into unwholesome, unskillful states of mind. So if you become caught into unskillful states of mind, the help you give will become less effective, and maybe even you end up in a worse situation than before. Burnout, or suffering, unhappiness. Even though your original intention was to help and do something good, you may become angry, despairing, disappointed, and so on, because of a lack of equanimity or an imbalance in your practice. So these 4 Brahma Viharas help us to guide us as we interact with the world. And the hardest one, of course, to develop is equanimity. If there's someone you basically love, you have metta for, goodwill for, you also need the equanimity to back up those times when that person may be suffering and you start to suffer because they're suffering. You don't want to see them ill, you don't want to see them in pain, you don't want to see them experiencing difficulty in their life. So you go to aversion maybe. You become caught into negative thinking because of your love, we would say your attachment for that person. As far as I can see, the only way to really sort this out is through developing mindfulness and meditation. The qualities of mindfulness, qualities of investigation of the Dhamma, developing wisdom, understanding, so you can see what's happening to yourself in that situation as you're helping that person or those people. Maybe it's in your job, you help people every day, and you have to learn how to separate your mind from the suffering of those people you're involved with. Or it may be just witnessing the suffering of others, on the news, or hearing the news about somebody you know, or being with someone you know who's suffering. How to help them without getting so attached that it drags your mind into despair or depression or anger. Or it could be just dealing with yourself, because these practices of Brahma Viharas we're directing to ourselves as well. As you meditate, you're one person in the equation, you're there, sitting there, or if you're helping someone, you're there helping them. You have to learn how to cultivate kindness and compassion to yourself without getting drawn into your own suffering, how to treat your suffering correctly so that you can develop equanimity towards your own suffering. How to avoid the second arrow, as it were. The Buddha gave that simile that somebody experiences pain, physical pain from some reason, could be from just sitting meditation you experience pain. Maybe you're experiencing a bit of pain in your legs now, or you're feeling tired now. That's the first arrow, the arrow of pain, and then what you think about it, attaching to that pain, and then what you think about it is the second arrow. So how to avoid the second arrow. So even if you're totally alone, you're still cultivating these 4 Brahma Viharas with yourself. How to maintain equanimity when you experience pain. Unpleasant feelings generated through your eyes, your ears, your tongue, sense of smell, skin, touching things, or just mental pain. How to maintain equanimity, maintain mindfulness, and not let your mind fall into unwholesome states, unskillful states, or if it has fallen into unwholesome states, how to quickly bring it out again. Our aim is to do it quickly, not to dwell or get stuck into greed, anger and delusion, even if we're totally alone. Whether with someone else or we're totally alone, how to pull the mind back out of that state. And the Buddha set a very high bar. He said you have to be able to do it as fast as you can snap your finger. So maybe if it's helping someone else, you have a feeling of tiredness, or that person, maybe they're giving you some difficulty through what they say, what they do, they're not cooperating, they're stubborn, they're difficult. You might fall into a feeling of frustration, anger, but you have to pull your mind out of that anger as fast as you can snap your finger to avoid the second arrow, creating suffering out of that unpleasant experience. Or it may be just you sitting there on your own in your meditation, remembering something unpleasant. Nobody is doing anything to you at that moment. You're just sitting there and you're doing it to yourself. You have to be able to establish mindfulness and pull your mind out of that anger or sadness or grief or whatever it may be. And your aim is to do it as fast as you can snap your finger. The only way, as far as I can see, the only way you can do that is by establishing strong, continuous mindfulness and then training yourself to investigate your own mind, develop your wisdom faculty, insight. And the way the Buddha encouraged us to do that is to observe the impermanent, changing nature of your mental states. Because if you can see them as impermanent, they arise, they pass away, you know they're not to be clung to and they're not self. Because what's impermanent is not a self, because it's impermanent. It arises, passes away. If you can see that, then your mind can let go. And if you let go often, you do it often enough, then you can do it quickly, easily, because you're familiar with that pattern, observing something arising and then observing it ceasing. You can hold your mindfulness with enough clarity to do that quickly. You say, I know this, let it go. If I hold on, I'm going to suffer, so you let it go. So whether you're doing that on the meditation cushion, or you're helping someone, or you're at work, the process is just the same. We have to learn how to introduce it into our activities, rather than see it as something separate that you only do once a day on your meditation cushion, but actually to learn how to do it in all activities, wherever, whenever. That's our goal. That's what the Buddha encouraged us to do. Something that can help is returning to your main meditation object regularly through the day. So if you practice mindfulness of breathing, say in the morning, first thing in the morning you do a meditation on the breathing, you practice this mindfulness, kind of get your mind ready, prepared for the day, bringing up some mindfulness with the breath. Whatever you're feeling like, whatever's coming up in your mind, doesn't matter. You do it first thing in the morning. And then at different times through your day, maybe you return to the breath, whether it's for 1 minute, or 5 minutes, or 10 minutes. When you have a break in your day, whether it's helping someone, or working, or shopping, or going here, going there, returning to the breath from periodically through the day is a way you just re-establish mindfulness, and then you use that mindfulness that you've established to contemplate what's going on in your mind as you're doing these other activities. And if you keep doing that, you're going to get better at it. You get to know your mind, and you see greed as greed, anger as anger, delusion as delusion. You get familiar with the changing landscape of your mind, the way different thoughts and emotions, feelings arise, pass away, and you get to know them. Oh, this arises and passes away, it's like this. You'll see thoughts that you've seen 100 times before, but when you see them with mindfulness, you know it's just a thought that arises, passes away. It's just a reaction to something, it's just a thought, a feeling, an emotion. And you don't have to grasp or hold on to them. You can do the opposite. You practice letting them go. Even in the midst of a busy, distracting situation, whether you're with some other people or doing some work or driving a car, whatever. You can do this. In practice of establishing mindfulness and letting go of greed, anger and delusion is not limited to time, place. It's not something that you can only do when you're on retreat or when you're on your meditation cushion. It's something you can do at any time if you turn your mind to be aware of itself. Maybe turn to the breath first. You take a few moments just to breathe in, breathe out mindfully, and then you contemplate whatever's arising. You can do that at any time. What we tend to do is when things are getting bad in our life, stressful, then we say, I need to meditate. But then when the stress is cleared up, things are improving again, and we forget all about it. So we don't develop much continuity or strength of mind. Mind is still a bit flimsy, and we try really hard when we're stressed because we see the need for it, but then once the stress is past, then we let it go again, we indulge again, go back to our old habits of enjoying plenty of thinking, imagining, worrying, getting attached to things until the next stressful crisis, and then we try again. We say, oh, I better get back to my meditation. The Buddha didn't teach like that. He taught to keep practicing regularly. Even when things are going well, keep practicing, just in case. Continuity of practice is what we're aiming for. Regular meditation and regular reflection on your state of mind. Over and over again. And the more you do it, probably you'll realize the more important it is, more important than anything else. Because your mind, this mind that we are trying to look after, like the orphan child, you need to keep looking after it, because in the end that's all you'll have left at the end of your life. Everything else disappears, doesn't it? You leave it behind. You can't take any material thing or any person with you when you die. You only take your mind with you. So it has to be your most valuable thing. So you should look after it better than anything else. All that time we spend looking after the body, particularly when we're younger, as you get older you realize it's only so good. Or spend all that time accumulating wealth to buy things, invest in things. In the end you have to let it all go. If you don't let it go, what happens? Well, you get caught into greed, anger and delusion over and over again. In terms of material things, we keep attaching to our wealth, we attach to people, the ones we love. So what happens? The mind gets stuck there, and it just fuels more attachment, more suffering, more anger, more worry, more greed, more desire. That's why the Buddha said the majority of people when they die, they don't go to a peaceful destination, they become ghosts, because they're still too attached to a something, somewhere. Sometimes it's important to look at your own mind and just question yourself. Say, if this was the last day of my life, if I was to die today, what would I take with me in terms of attachment? Where is my mind still stuck? Where do I still get angry? Where do I still get worried and afraid? What do I still long for? What do I miss? What do I long for? Could be a person, a feeling, an experience, sense of self that's invested in your job or your wealth, this or that. This is what we're learning. If we say we're looking after our mind, if you're really looking after your mind, you're learning to let go. We don't see that half the time because of our delusion. We think looking after the mind means cramming it full of all kinds of attachment. This experience and that experience, this pleasure and that pleasure, wanting this, wanting that. We think the more we get, the more happy we'll be. But it's actually the opposite, because it all turns into attachment. The highest happiness is equanimity, isn't it? Accepting everything is impermanent. What's impermanent is not really yours. And that's where letting go comes from. And the Buddha spent more time teaching about impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, lack of self than anything else. Because these are the tools, the reflections we use to bring our mind to see the truth, the reality. Any person you love, one day you have to separate from them. Anything you love, you have to separate from it. And this is not popular for many people. They don't want to hear this. Who wants to hear that they've got to separate from everything that they like and they love? But it's wisdom. You might as well hear it now and get ready for it now than postpone it like so many people do. They postpone it till the last day of their life and they say, oh, have I really got to let go of everything? And then all the tears come and the stress and the fear and the worry. Don't wait till that point. That's why Ajahn Chah, one of his favourite phrases was, die before you die. You let all that attachment go now. Let it die. But we don't like to hear that. Death is considered, if you talk about death, people start getting worried. You see their eyes shifting left to right when you talk about death because they feel uncomfortable. What they're doing is simply postponing the suffering. They think, oh, if we don't talk about it now, then we won't have to suffer, that's the end of it. It's not the end of it, it just means you'll have to face it later on. And when you get older, if you haven't trained in the Dhamma, maybe it's harder to face it. It's harder to let go when you're old, your body's old, your mindfulness is not so strong, your memory's not so good, you can't even remember what the Buddha taught. It's harder to meditate, harder to let go when you get older. But if you've been practicing since today, it might actually be easier when you're older, because you've done it more and more and more, you get better at it. Ajahn Chah encouraged us to let go, to die to the Dhamma, give up to the Dhamma, give up. Those things that you're attached to, that you've kind of been putting aside, waiting for a rainy day to practice meditation and let go of. Don't wait for that rainy day. At the moment in Australia, every day is a rainy day anyway, so you might as well do it today. Let it go today. That thing your mind is being stuck into and that's actually causing you suffering, that little bit of aversion for that person or that experience that you don't like, that little bit of greed, clinging on to something, let it go today. Bring up the mindfulness, make your mind really firm and determined, let it die right now. Practice dying today. What's left is a mind that's free. Free, peaceful, pure, happy, equanimous. And these are the qualities the Buddha encouraged us to develop. Contentment as opposed to discontent, happiness as opposed to stress, equanimity as opposed to confusion, attachment. And not just when you practice meditation, but every day, throughout your day. So there's a few reflections for you tonight. I'll end the talk there, and afterwards we can see if anyone has any questions.